Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to Coder Conversations. If you want to catch up on any previous episode or contact us, visit us at www.coderconvers.com. I'm your host, Kevin.
And I'm Brian Russick, professional drummer, drum teacher based out of the Suffolk County, Long Island, New York area. If you'd like to book a lesson with me, I could be found at brianrussick.com.
And for today's guest, we have Mark Musick, author of Boxes, The Secret Life of Howard Hughes. Welcome to the show, Mark.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, Mark, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you on. And so Howard Hughes, he seems to be like a really enigmatic character. If you don't mind, can you give us a little bit of background for those who might not be familiar with Howard Hughes? Who is he, and why did you write a book about him?
Well, that's pretty important because Howard Hughes is the name of the past, basically. He was the richest man in America
Wow.
in the 1970s, and he was a very reclusive man. He kind of hid away from the public starting in the 1950s. His last official picture was taken in 53 or 54, and he was very, very hidden. And that's the way he wanted it. He did not want to be in the public eye. Prior to that, he set many aviation records. He flew around the world. In 1938, he set a transcontinental land speed record, 1935. And the man loved movies also. He produced many, many, many movies in the 30s and the 40s. Someone told me, they said, Howard liked to get involved with the movies, but the more he got involved with the movies, the worse they did. So I thought that sounds like Howard.
Interesting.
He was born in 1905. His parents died young. He had about an eighth grade education. That was it. He never really went to high school. He referred to himself as an orphan. For many times, his parents sent him out to schools in Pennsylvania for elementary, junior high school. They tried to get rid of him because they really didn't want him around. So he didn't really have a joyous childhood. Both parents died very young, and he was left at age 19 with a massive fortune that his dad had generated in the oil business.
Oh, wow.
And then he started using that then to move into movies, to do into aviation. And then as you move into the 60s, he bought many, many hotels in Las Vegas. He owned an airport there, TV stations there, things like that. So, and then he got into building equipment for the military. So he was a very, very smart man, but his later life was just hidden because it was he described me as two different people, one of them being a commanding, charming, intelligent man, and the other one being a 90-pound derelict, long-haired, long fingernailed, body odor, just rotten teeth.
Wow.
And what we end up with there after you research it, there's two people. Starting in 1969, there was two people.
So, like, what do you think led to kind of like a huge divergence in personalities?
Oh, I think he liked that image. He liked that because it threw confusion into it.
Okay.
And Eva McClellan, who told me this story, she said he threw confusion in everything he did. He loved confusion. And therefore, he liked all of this stuff of who really knows what's going on, because you can't tell from the news reports what's really happening. And so that's what he enjoyed, actually, was that confusion. But what they did, as we have found out, took a lot of research to do this, what we have determined is in 1969, he started taking on another identity. And it was the identity of a man named Verner Nicely. Now, Verner Nicely, as we've researched him, was born in 1921, went in World War II, primarily in the Pacific, and then left the military in 1955 and went to work for the CIA. He was living in Panama, working counter-drug missions out of Colombia, and the man just disappeared for all we know. He was 5'11", and he was just now gone. Howard now starts using the name Verner Nicely, but calls himself Nick Nickley to add confusion, throw more confusion into it. He calls himself Nick Nickley, and that's the name that he met Eva with. As we put this together, what we think, there's a lot of speculation. What we think happened is the CIA went to Howard, this one ran 60, 68 or 69, went to Howard and said, there's a Soviet submarine that sank northwest of Hawaii, and we'd like to raise it. So they went to Howard, and Howard said, okay, I'll do it. And he built a ship called the Glomar Explorer that went and picked this submarine up.
Oh, wow.
But what we think he did, he said, I'll go do that mission for you, CIA. You get me another identity.
Right.
And he took this identity of Vernon Nicely, calling himself Nick Nickley. And then that is who Eva meets in 1969 in Panama.
So she had no idea.
Not at that point.
Wow.
He had aides around him all the time. Tall, handsome man, 6'4", aides around him all the time. She was very friendly. She resembled a little bit of Elizabeth Taylor.
Okay.
Because Howard loved Elizabeth Taylor. So she resembled Elizabeth Taylor. So there's a physical attraction. In November 69, they're in Panama, and they're enjoying each other's company. And then in December 69 and January 70, he's gone. He just disappears out of Panama. And she's really not sure what happened to this guy. He's just gone. And she thought, well, I guess that's over. Well, in February 70, they're in Panama, he comes back. He's back to Panama. He's got his aides with him. And she says, Nick, where have you been? And he said, well, I had some business in the States to attend to. And she said, while you were gone, I felt like I was being followed. And he said, you were being followed. We checked out everything about you.
Yeah.
So that's kind of scary, I think. And she asked, can I meet your friends? And he says, no, that's not wise. That's too dangerous for you to meet my friends. So they're engaged in March of 70. They're married in May of 70 in Panama. Now, this is interesting because I have the wedding certificate. And on the wedding certificate, it has his name spelled wrong. There's a place for parents on both sides, and his parents are not filled in. And her age is wrong. So if you take these factors and you look them against, Howard Hughes married a lady named Jean Peters. I think it was 1957. Howard Hughes and Jean Peters were married. And on that wedding certificate, he used an alias, she used an alias, and the judge used an alias. The officiant used an alias. So everything's beginning to kind of come together here.
Yeah.
But she doesn't know. She doesn't know this is Howard Hughes at this point in time. It's a tall man who's doing business, and she enjoys his company.
So she just thinks he's just some businessman, and just goes off, does his work, comes back.
Just Nick Nickley. Nick Nickley going on. The interesting thing about it is he would go do his work at night on ships. He'd go to his work at night on ships. Now, there's an interesting scenario here. I'm going to move a little bit forward to, December 1971. December 1971. They're in Panama, and Eva sees that Nick is irritated. Something's bothering Nick. So she says, what's wrong with you? And he said, there's about ready to be a book come out about Howard Hughes, and it's full of lies. And Eva right now is pretty selective on her responses to him. And she says, well, shouldn't the public know about that? And a week later after that, there's a national interview with Howard Hughes and 6 journalists from Los Angeles. And in that interview, they talked to him for 2.5 hours. They asked him about his long fingernails, and he says, well, I really don't have long fingernails. My health is pretty good. And he answers the question. They determined this is Howard. Well, this is a big deal because Howard Hughes to the public is this long-haired, long fingernail, drug-addicted, bedridden derelict.
Right.
Eva hears the interview and recognizes the man. She said, that voice is you, Nick. That voice is you. Right. And she begins to put the puzzle together.
That's awesome.
So did she mention like how she felt once she came to the realization that she was dealing with Howard Hughes?
Well, she didn't fully understand it until probably a few months after that. And then she had it figured out what was going on with this guy. And then he revealed it to her. They lived in Panama until 72. And in June of 72, they moved to Arizona. And then in about April 74, they left Arizona and moved to Alabama. And it was in Alabama that he revealed it to her. I'm Howard Hughes.
Right.
And she says, well, yeah, I already knew it. And she said after that point, she could ask him anything about his childhood, about his parents, about flying the spruce goose. Why did you fly the Hercules? They're so dangerous. And he would talk about all of those things that she asked him then at that point. But at that point, he revealed it to her. I'm Howard Hughes. And he was very, very open then at that point, talking about friends in childhood and things like that.
And so did he tell her everything, or were there certain pieces of the puzzle that, weren't filled in at that point?
There were pieces of the puzzle that were not filled in. He was
Okay.
very selective at what he would tell her and what he didn't want to tell her. He was very, very good at that. His
Okay.
mind was compartmentalized.
Right.
So he could keep every bit of pieces of detail in his mind and know who knows what, and then move things forward at that point.
Oh, wow.
So like when she got married to him, he's already revealed his identity and everything. So like when they were married, did she get more of the billionaire experience or more of the reclusive experience, just from what she's told you?
I'll tell you, the guy was a billionaire, but he didn't act like one. And
Hmm.
money, material things is not what he wanted. He was not a material person. And they lived very, very basically. They lived very, very basic in Alabama, in a rundown house for 4 years, and then they moved to a travel trailer out in the middle of the woods.
Oh, wow.
And that's the way he wanted to live. She said he had access to money. She never saw it, but if he wanted to, there's a student that in Alabama, there's a student that they got to know, and she was going to Troy University in Alabama, and he helped her pay tuition and buy books to help her, move through school and things like that. So he could be a very generous man, but he wasn't necessarily by nature. No.
So how was a guy that he's like really tall, handsome guy, billionaire? How was he able to kind of just disappear from public sight without people eventually figuring out this other guy is him?
Okay, how this worked is about 1969 when Howard takes on this other identity provided by the CIA. They bring now this drug addicted guy on, and what I have been told is that he is a friend of Howard's who was 20 years older, and he was a drug addict, and they just provided him drugs and food for the remainder of his life. And he was the one who died in 1976. It was his stand-in was the one who died in 1976. The books all say that Howard looks like he's 20 years older than what he should be. Well, he looked like it because the man
Right.
that they had standing in for him was 20 years older.
Wow. So yeah, that's really interesting. So I know like back then they didn't have the internet, so you couldn't necessarily like immediately cross reference things. So I'm pretty sure that helped.
And this derelict man did die of natural causes in 1976.
Okay.
He died of natural causes, and then that, of course, was the end of Howard Hughes's life, basically. It is interesting. During that funeral, they were living in Alabama, a little house about 7 miles west of Troy, Alabama, on Highway 29, I think it is. And he would not let her have a TV. He said TVs are worthless. We're not having a TV.
Yeah.
So they're listening to the Howard Hughes situation on the radio. Now, at this point, Eva knows she's married to Howard Hughes. And the aides are living down the road about half mile away in another house. So the aides have been there all the time too, in every one of these moves, protecting him or communicating for him. Eva says the public's going to realize something is very strange about this Howard Hughes funeral because they're trying to get the body in the ground too fast. And Nick, who's Howard, says to Eva, well, you really know who your friends are when you fake your death and you see who shows up at the service.
Yeah, right.
So now we have the service. There's
Yeah.
23 people at the service. 22 of them are his cousins, most of whom Howard never even met.
Wow.
It was a 4-minute service. A 4-minute service. Now, the richest man in America gets a 4-minute service. Does that make any sense? Or is that we got to get
very
this
odd? That's very odd. Yeah.
We got to get this guy on the ground. The only other person who was there was a CIA operative. And I think the CIA operative's job was to get this guy on the ground as quickly as possible. And in less than 48 hours of death, he was buried.
Yeah.
So, like in terms of his dealings with the CIA, like what were you made aware of? Like what exactly was he doing with them?
Well, the interesting things, it's my speculation that he was influential with the CIA when it started in 1948, I think it was 47, 48. That's my speculation because he seemed to be interactive with them a lot. We know of the things of the Glomar Explorer, that they wanted that Soviet submarine raised. And he built the ship that went and did it, brought it back up. We also know of the satellite communication system that the CIA was using. Howard put it up. And therefore, no one could trace his phone calls. And he used that to communicate. But no one could trace his phone calls on that telephonic communication that we talked about in January of 72. They tried to trace the phone calls and they couldn't do it. No one could do it. Well, he was using the CIA's communication satellites.
That's a smart move.
And then we learned that the guy at his funeral, the only other guy that wasn't a family member, was a CIA operative. So there's all kinds of things I think Howard was involved with the CIA. And then the name that he was using was a CIA operative. Had to be given to him by the CIA, knowing that man wasn't around anymore. Or maybe he's living under some other identity. I mean, we don't know.
Right.
So you entitled the name of the book Boxes. Did that have anything to do with the CIA connection, or where did that come from?
Oh, that's really good. I like that question. Boxes. Eva wanted it named Boxes because that's how she lived. She lived out of boxes because they had to be able to move. And they moved and moved and moved and moved. Therefore, more confusion, more confusion, more confusion. So they moved and moved and moved. And when I met her, this was 2002, she was living in an apartment and out of boxes. It's funny because they moved to a wooded acreage. I think it was 1981 or 82 in Alabama. And she took me there. I went and saw it. And it's a really remote area, hard to find. And they were living in a travel trailer for 11 years. Then they got this bigger trailer there. But there was containers out in the woods, and there was about 6 different, like Rubbermaid trash containers with a lid on them. And I said, Eva, what are those things for? And she said, well, that's where Nick kept his clothes. And I said, what? She said he had to be able to leave at a moment's notice.
At a moment's notice, yeah.
And that's the way they lived, is he could go, they could bring a pickup truck in, they could throw those 5 containers in the back of the pickup truck and throw him in the front, and in 3 minutes, he could disappear. And that's the way they lived for 20 years, where he could be gone in minutes.
Wow, it's like like Bourne Supremacy or something like that.
Exactly. The same type of thinking. Same type of thinking.
Did she mention anything on like why she decided to stay with him and live that sort of lifestyle, especially like in comparison to the lifestyle that he could have had been living with his with all his money and wealth.
Oh, that's very good. Very good. She got tired of him. He had a strange personality, and she would get tired of him, and she would just leave for sometimes 4, 6, 8 months at a time. She'd leave. And as we put those times together that she would just separate from him, we'd find those are the times that he would have meetings with the president of Nicaragua, the governor of Nevada, the times he'd fly airplanes and things like that. Those would be the times that he would leave. But somebody was monitoring her every one of these times because he would always get back with her and say, "Oh, I love you. I love you. We need to get back together again." And well, she loved him too. There's times she couldn't put up with him, but she still loved the guy. As
Right.
hard as he was to love, she still loved him.
So yeah, to me it sounds like he was involved like deeply in maybe some undercover government operations. I've kind of heard of stories like this, like they get a rich guy, they need him to play a role, and maybe he's doing something like rescuing children, and they need him to play the role of like a rich businessman who would procure these children, something like that, because he would have the mannerisms and everything down. So I guess like once you have all of this money, the typical material wealth doesn't mean anything, and now you're more moved by mission. You feel like he became more motivated by mission in life than just stacking more wealth because he's already had so much.
It is interesting because we know 4 names that he used. We know this Nick Nicolay name, and then there was another name that he used later in life, and another name that he used earlier in life. So, and all of these are real people. They're all real people. We don't know how he gets them, but as we look at their descriptions of how tall they were and things like that, um, somehow he was able to get these names, and he used them throughout his lifetime.
So, like, why do you think it took so long for her to kind of come out with the story? Like, I know she probably could have quote unquote exposed him and got fame and fortune and all of that. Why do you think it took for her meeting you to come out with the story?
I think she was afraid of it.
Yeah.
She knew that he had CIA connections, and she was afraid of it. He told her multiple times that you know too much, you could be kidnapped at any time. And if someone tells you that of authority, and he was of authority, it would be something that would weigh on your mind a lot. But she loved him, but she put up with him a lot because he was a hard personality to put up with. What one guy ran into who knew Howard in younger life, he said Howard was not a likable man. Okay, I got you.
So yeah, the book you've written is quite lengthy. So can you tell us about some of the highlights of the book, some of the highlights of Howard's life, or some of the interesting stories in the book? I know you can't spoil everything.
Well, some of the interesting things that we have found out, um, Howard Hughes supposedly, according to history, had no children. Well, that's not true. There's 2 of them
Yeah.
that we have in the book. One is named Cindy, and she came to us and told us her story, and another one named John McDonald. And both of them came to us, relayed their stories to us, and we're sitting there. Well, I mean, it sounds reasonable, but the only way to tell is DNA. That's the only way to tell.
Right.
So, and if you have a common parent, you have a 50% match of your DNA. And both of them agreed to do the DNA testing, and lo and behold, found out, yeah, they had that 50% match. What we found out since then is there are 7 other children that have come forward, each having their own individual stories about Howard being their father. The other thing, we think they're all kept a secret.
Yeah.
They're all kept a secret. And I believe what he was thinking was these children could be kidnapped and they're going to ask for ransom.
Right.
And if they're kept a secret, then the chances of that are less. But what we have learned from each of these children is more things about Howard and types of things that he that he did for his children, although he never did anything long term for them at all, which is very sad.
Yeah, and it sounds like he had very specific reasons for hiding away. I don't think it was just like general, oh, let me not be out in the public eye. I think, there's probably a reason beneath it.
I think you're exactly right, and I don't know what some of those are. I know that he started interacting with the mafia in the 40s, late 40s.
Okay.
I know that because John McDonald's father, his son, the father he was living with, was mafia. So Howard was involved with the mafia in the 40s, we know. And then we also know in the 60s, when he started buying hotels in Las Vegas, they were all bought from the mafia. And he paid them much more than what they were ever valued at.
That's a
So he definitely had ties to the mafia. And we know he definitely had ties with the CIA. And maybe ties like that is a reason to not become very public.
to hide away. Yeah, that makes sense.
So it sounds like he was a bit of a rolling stone. So from the stories that you've gotten from the children, what impression did they have of him? And I mean, they probably only seen him in brief spurts. So.
I think the general impression was he was not a loving father, and he didn't spend much time with any of them.
Yeah.
That's kind of the conclusion that we do. It is funny. The girls, the one thing that comes together with the girls at about age 10 or 11, they all received a winter coat, of which they know the parents they were living with could have never have afforded. And so that's kind of a common thing that we have seen with the girls is that winter coat about age 10 or 11. And they say it was beautiful. It was absolutely a beautiful, beautiful coat. The boys, I don't have anything common like that I can bring up that I'm familiar with anyway. But he did not want his children to become public during when the stand-in died in 76. The will came up. Okay, does anyone have Howard Hughes's will? And at that point, 30 people came forward and said, I've got the will of Howard Hughes.
I've
30
got
people did.
Now, how did they sort that?
Well, the courts ruled none of them are legit.
Yeah.
None of them are legit. And therefore,
Yeah.
the money went to, remember those 22 cousins at the funeral? The money went to that group.
Oh, wow.
And meanwhile, one of the children did actually try to come forward and say, I'm a child of Howard Hughes. Her story's in the book, Cindy. I'm a child of Howard Hughes. And she just got shut down. She got shut down. Her documents disappeared. She got nowhere with it. Absolutely nowhere with it.
So, like, what ended up happening with her, with Cindy?
The estate then, at that point, let me think. It was I believe in 1976, it was valued at 2.2 billion. Now that's a lot of money in the mid 70s.
Wow. Yeah.
2.2 billion. That was his estate. And so they fought over that for 35 years. So what I think the IRS got a huge chunk of it. I think the lawyers probably got the next huge chunk of it. And then whatever was left over was divided among these 22, the cousins, the other family members. None of the children ever saw a penny of it.
Wow.
That's pretty sad.
That's terrible.
Yeah, it is sad. It is sad.
Yeah.
It seems like how those state fights usually end up going. The government, the lawyers take the majority of it because the family is constantly in court fighting over it. They end up with hardly anything at the end. So, like in terms of Eva, how did you end up meeting her? Like, and what was y'all's like personal relationship?
That's interesting because I was working for a nonprofit. And Eva made contact with the nonprofit and said, I'd like to leave you some property. And okay.
Right.
And she told me about her husband of, it's strange because he won't talk on the phone and his birth date's wrong. and all of these things, this kind of weirdness, meant nothing to me. Well, I knew he died. It was November 2001. They're living in Alabama, Dothan, Alabama, and I knew he had died. I was in Georgia in January 2002, so I thought I'm going to go meet Eva. I'd never met her. I talked to her on the phone multiple times. I'm going to go meet her. She knew I had a military background. So I went and met Eva, and she said, the thing is something I want to tell you. And I said, what? And she said, the Howard Hughes thing. And I just thought it was crazy. One thing that might have made her comfortable with me is for the last 2 years, Nick was in and out of the VA facility in Montgomery, Alabama. And it wasn't because he was a military member. It was because the identity that he was using was a military member.
I see.
Therefore, he got medical services in the VA
for
and
free,
it's
right?
funny because if you don't have Social Security, you don't have Medicare. So he did not have Medicare.
Oh, wow.
He did not have Medicare was available to him. Therefore, he went to the VA for service, and they would send him back and forth. And his health was declining. Now he's 95 years old, and his health was declining, and he wasn't able to go up the steps into their house in the woods in Alabama. And so she called me and said, would you call up the VA in Montgomery, Alabama, and see if you might be able to influence them to build a ramp?
Oh,
And
wow.
so, and I did. As General Musick, I called up the director of the VA, and the ramp got built. Whether I did anything or not, I don't know, but the ramp got built. And I think she always thought that my help did that in some way. I don't know if it did. And then we requested all of the medical records from the Montgomery VA for 2 years and looked at that. And in there, it talks about General Musick making contact to get the ramp built. It also talks about, it says, where were you from? And he was from Texas. I grew up in Texas. Werner Nicely grew up in Ohio,
Right.
And it says, what were your hobbies? Well, I used to fly airplanes. So everything that was in this thing is back to Howard Hughes. And he was still 72 inches. Now, as we get older, we're going to lose some height. He was still 72 inches. And Werner Nicey, the Reverend Werner Nicey, was never 72 inches at the height of his age. He was never 72 inches. So again, things all kind of come around to the point that I said, okay, this is real. Was in 2006. It was the summer 2006. And Eva was living in an apartment. And Eva had never showed me a picture of Nick. And I said, Eva, do you have a picture of Nick? And she said, well, he never wanted his picture taken. There's no wedding pictures. But she says, I might have a couple. And she started looking through her boxes there. And she pulled out a couple of these. Remember, they're the 3.5 by 3.5 pictures of the early 80s. And you couldn't see anything. It was a man far, far away. Tall man. You could see it was a tall man.
Yeah.
Far, far away. And you couldn't make anything out of it at all. And I said, can I have these? And she said, yeah. And she ultimately gave me, we have medical records, military records, everything, pictures. We have everything that backs her story up. She ultimately gave me the pictures. Now, at that point in time, I was actually talking to a detective in the Dallas Police Department, thinking, is this real or not? How do I know if this is real? And the detective told me, she said, if this lady gives you something, it's real. If she never gives you a thing, it's not. Well, in the end, she gave me everything. I mean, I've got my own boxes of medical records, military records, of Vernon Ice's medical records. And we had someone look at those versus Nick Nickley's medical records. And they look at it and say, these are two different people.
So like at a certain point, you kind of felt like, okay, she's telling the truth. At what point did you realize, hey, I wanted to really document this, really research this, and put this story out?
That took me about 2 more years
Mm.
to kind of figure out how do I approach this. And I went and read the book to her 3 times, and she did not want it out until after her death. She was worried. She was worried about it. So she did not want it out until after her death, but she wanted to make sure everything was accurate. Every detail was accurate. She says,
Yeah.
I want no Hollywood in this book. I want no Hollywood there.
Yeah.
And so everything had to be accurate, and I would read through it to her. I'd read it to her, and she would, prove it or say, no, no, that's wrong. It needs to say this. And that's when we put all those things together. But I didn't really look at going to a book company until after she had died, because I did not feel comfortable in doing that at all. Then after she died, we started looking for a publisher of it.
Now, in general, how were you, or what brought you to do this?
I asked Eva, I said, Eva, why do you want this book out? And she thought for a minute, and she said, Howard fooled the world. She said, the public should know what the real story is. That funeral back in 1976 was so disgusting that the public needs to know the truth. And so that's what, there's no other way to tell the truth than publish a book. And
Right.
so that's what we did, and get it out and try to make sure everything in there is accurate. But it's kind of you decide, because we don't have the proof. We don't have the DNA on Howard Hughes. There's supposedly some place in Texas that has Howard Hughes's DNA, but surprisingly, they're under court order never to release it.
Wow.
Now, why does that surprise you?
So I know
But we wanted to make sure that everything in there was accurate and that it would reflect Eva's story, so that the public would know Howard Hughes really didn't die in 1976,
Right.
that was all a hoax.
So I know it took you a little while to believe this. How did the publishers react initially, and how did the eventual consumers of the book react? Like, did they kind of accept everything you were saying, or was there a lot of skepticism around that?
Oh, there's instant skepticism. Instant skepticism. Because
Yeah.
when we went to the publisher, it's kind of like, what are you even talking about? Why are you even talking about this?
Why are you doing this? Right.
Yeah, until we can get over that thing and say, well, maybe this actually did happen the way she says it happened. But when I do a lot of presentations and things like that, and there's the first part of it, they look at you like you're crazy. You are crazy. This can't possibly be true. And then some of them kind of get into it of, well, wait a minute, maybe this could be true. But there's still those holdouts in the end of the presentation that say, I don't believe it. No way am I going to believe this is true, because I've been told he died in 76, and that's what I believe.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, that's fine. Kind of believe what you want to believe.
Did you kind of get put in like the conspiracy theorist box initially? And
No, I've got hit with a lot of that. Just another
Mhm.
conspiracy theory. Yeah, that's a nice name for it, but what we've got in there is everything's documented. Every detail that we've got, where do we get it from? To give credit, well, number one, to give credit back to where we got the detail, and then how does it all fit in with the overall story?
Right.
And once you read it, you think, this really could be true. In fact, it probably is true. And then what I've run into, some of these, this is not in the book, but we've run into people that have said, yes, it's true. He was living with Eva McClelland in Alabama under this other name. Yes, it is true.
So, like, what was the reaction of some of the people who actually believed that this was true? Like, I know it had to have been mind blowing, considering they thought he passed in the 70s.
I gave a presentation to a group. My audience is older. I'm looking for an audience that's 70 or above, and people who have a military background or an aviation background. and that's kind of my audience. And I gave a presentation, and one guy came up to me afterwards. He said, I was in the CIA. He said, "This is exactly what they would do.
Yeah.
That's exactly what they would do."
Right.
Okay, I'm not asking any more questions.
So, like, what was the actual process like of researching this? I know obviously you have the firsthand source of Eva. Like, what other sources did you go to, or what documents did you gather to corroborate everything and to really validate everything?
Oh, that's a good question. Because what we had to do, we had to take Eva's story, her life story, and mix that in with what was happening in the United States and in the world with Howard Hughes. So we had to go back and get books and books but there's been 50 books written about this guy. And it is funny when you read them through, there's all kind of stuff in there that doesn't match
Yeah.
in the different books. But when you read them through, you can pick out certain details. Okay, that's a match. That's a match. Then there's magazine articles, all kind of magazine articles on him. And of course, I collected every magazine that I could get regarding him, and read them and learn more about it. Of if what Eva's telling me, does it fit? Does it work in these stories? And lo and behold, it all works. I had a presentation I did in Kansas, and a guy from a university in Missouri came over, and he said, I've been researching what you're saying, and everything fits like a glove. He
Yeah.
said everything is a perfect fit in timing of what he was doing in his life. Interesting story. Eva told me this many, many times, and I didn't, okay. She said, the way he told me for sure that he was Howard Hughes, they were in Florida, and she noticed it was February of 75, February 75. And she noticed he was looking for something in the mail. And one day he comes in with a magazine, and it was a True magazine. You guys are way too young to remember True magazine. It was a True magazine from February 75. And he opened up the magazine and he held it up to Eva, and it was a picture of Howard Hughes. And so now you have Nick right next to it and a picture of Howard Hughes. And Eva goes, "Well, Nick, that's you." She already knew it at this point.
Yeah.
She already knew it. But that was the turning point. She said she let him read the magazine and she never saw it again. So I started researching this. Okay, True magazine, February 75. I looked and looked and looked and looked to find a True magazine to confirm her story. Finally, in a library in New Jersey, I found the magazine.
Of all places, New Jersey.
My goodness, a true story of it. I got it. I made it. I brought it back. I showed Eva, "Is this the magazine?" She said, "Yes, that is the magazine." And so everything that she would come up with, we're able to confirm, yes, it is true. What you're telling is just exactly accurate.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I know like the surveillance ability to access information, it was quite different back during that period. 50s, 60s, 70s, and so on. Do you think something like that would be possible today? Let's just say the world's richest man today, Elon Musk. Do you think with today's technology and ability to access data that he would be able to disappear and reinvent himself and nobody really knows who that is?
I think it is possible. Yes. I think it's hard to do, but if you got the government behind you, Howard had the government behind him um, back then, but I think you can do it now. I think you really can.
Are there any cases of people who you think might have had like a quote unquote disappearance and maybe the death was staged? Or if you don't want to go into that, that's fine.
Oh, I think I'm not. I think I'm not going to speculate on that one.
So yeah, just to dive into a little bit about your history. Can you tell us about like maybe a little bit about your military background and what kind of like what did you end up doing in the military? Did any of that help you like during like interviewing with Eva or just accessing documents, etc.
Well, the Freedom of Information Act. I did request. I did request from the CIA information on Werner Nicely. I know he was a CIA operative. His family told him he was a CIA operative,
Yeah.
and we know he probably disappeared in the late '60s, and we know he was working counter drugs in Panama. And they sent me a letter back, said we have no information for you.
Hmm.
Basically, I guess I probably didn't expect much more than that.
Right.
That they would say on that, but that we did try that Freedom of Information Act and got nowhere. And then about 12 years ago, the FBI was releasing a bunch of information on Howard Hughes or something, and so I called up the FBI and said, I'd like to have this. They said, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, we'll send it. He said, nothing, nothing was
Nothing. Yeah.
nothing was ever sent.
Wow.
Well, one other aspect here, interesting. Howard was not a material man. His son told me that Howard spent his money on power.
Hmm.
And I said, okay, what do you mean by that? And he said, power is owning presidents.
Wow.
And that's how Howard spent his money, on owning presidents. And he told me, he said, Howard owned Richard Nixon flat out.
Yeah.
He just owned everything about him. And Howard was living in Nevada at this point in time, and Nixon was doing nuclear testing in Nevada. And Howard didn't like that. Howard's a germaphobe,
All right.
and you're doing nuclear testing in my
In
backyard.
my backyard.
I
Yeah.
don't like that. And so he went to Nixon to stop it, and Nixon wouldn't stop it.
Right.
So now you look at Watergate. Hunt and Liddy, who were arrested for Watergate, worked for a gentleman named Robert Bennett, who worked for Howard Hughes. The office they were going into was a gentleman named Larry O'Brien, I believe his name was Larry O'Brien. He was also on the Howard Hughes payroll. So now you have Howard Hughes's people going into an office that Howard Hughes controlled, and it does Nixon in. It does Nixon in, and that's exactly what Howard wanted. And you remember that 18-minute lapse in the tapes of Evelyn Wood? There's an 18-and-a-half-minute lapse in the tapes that just don't know what it said. According to H.R. Halterman, who was Richard Nixon's chief of staff, it's in his book, H.R. Halterman said that was the Howard Hughes connection to Watergate. That's why that 18 minutes had to disappear,
That's why
because
it's
that was
gone.
Howard Hughes'
Yeah.
connection to Watergate.
Interesting.
So there's all kind of little bits and pieces here that begin to come together that is not what the public's been told.
Hmm. So yeah, I think like you mentioned, his son said he was more into power than just stockpiling material wealth. So maybe him getting out of the public light would enable him to kind of make more power moves without as much skepticism. He's able to exert that power, exert his push without having the scrutiny of the public eye. So uh, obviously, that would be speculation, but you think that could have been one of the reasons that he did his disappearing act?
Oh, I think you're exactly correct. And how they did this was he with Eva had 3 aides with him, and then with the stand-in, there's 3 aides with the stand-in. So they could move that stand-in, where they moved the stand-in from Bermuda, from Bahamas to Nicaragua to England to Canada to back to Mexico. They
Yeah.
moved that stand-in, 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 and then Eva and Nick moved. But they were communicating. Remember that CIA communication satellite thing? They could communicate instantly, and no one could trace it.
Oh, it's
So that's how
amazing.
they could keep in communication, was the CIA communication satellite, and they would just be anywhere in the world, and
Yeah.
they were.
That's awesome.
So I know, like, there's kind of a lot of shadowy figures that he was affiliated with, like you mentioned, possibly the mafia, obviously the CIA. So, upon like researching this and getting some of this information, did you have to be very careful that you wouldn't step on any toes?
Oh yes, oh yes, oh yes, oh yes. Yeah, there's things that we purely stay away from because there's no win, there's no upside to it. So why go there? So we were very careful on what we included in the book, and there's no reason to go in other areas because there's you don't want to go there. You just don't want to go there.
Got it.
Absolutely. So like we're getting close to the top of the hour. So if the audience wanted to buy your book, what would you say are some of the main big selling points of the book? Like what is really going to grab their attention?
What grabs your attention is the fact of what Howard Hughes did, the things that he is able to accomplish, being invisible like that, and being able to hide away, using the government's help to hide away, and then but still influence, still have an influence in the world secretly, which is really pretty amazing to think about of how he did it all.
That's the pretty incredible part to me.
So for those who may not be aware, what is the name of the book once again?
Name of the book is Boxes: The Secret Life of Howard Hughes. And probably the best place to get it just on Amazon. Just go on Amazon.
Yeah.
Second edition. Second edition. We put the first edition out in 2010, and then more and more and more information has come out on the second. And we put the second edition out in 2016. And now since then, there's been more information come out. The information just keeps adding to what we know, adding on to what we know. And we're 50 years later, and it's still adding on to what we thought we knew then.
Wow. So are you going to release, additional volumes of this, or what are you going to do with the new information?
There could be.
Yeah.
So do you find like as time progresses and more of this information comes out, more and more people, it corroborates everything you're saying, and they believe it. They lose a lot of the skepticism.
Yeah, we've had people come to us and say he was involved with the government program in 1984. Now, this is 8 years after Howard died. He's involved with the government program in 1984, and Howard Hughes was in the meetings.
Oh wow!
Things like that. And then we've had children. Two of the boys came to us and said, "Yeah, he lived and was living with Eva McClelland in Alabama in the 80s, 90s, so forth." Just further confirmation of he wanted to do it, and he found a way to do it. He found a lady that loved him, who kept the secret,
Right.
and he did it.
Awesome. And yeah, are you working on any other projects at the moment that you want to mention?
There's a couple I'm working on, but I'm not ready to talk about them yet.
Okay, no problem. And if our audience wanted to reach out to you and get in contact with you, I know there's an Amazon page, but is there an email address, website, or anything?
Email address is best. Our website got taken down, so
Okay.
email address is musicksm@aol.com. musicksm@aol.com.
Awesome, man. It was definitely a pleasure having you on the show. Before we get out of here, did you want to leave our audience with any closing thoughts?
Well, I really appreciate this opportunity. I mean, you guys are young. Most of the young folks, you look at them, they say, "Who are you talking about?" I don't know who you're even talking about. So
I heard of them. I definitely heard of them.
Oh, yeah, the name is there. Even the name is getting less well known, let's say, because that was 50 years ago that he supposedly died. That's a long time ago in a life, a long time ago.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. When I looked them up, yeah, it kind of like I wasn't really able to find much like of information you were presenting. So I was wondering, is this a completely different guy? So it's really interesting, like all of the facts that you brought to light.
And most of the books written about him do not ever go in that last 5 years of his life. They just don't go there because you can't explain it. You cannot explain what was going on there, and so they just left it out. They just don't even try to go. There's a good movie, The Aviator, I think 2005 with Leonardo DiCaprio.
Oh yeah.
Really good movie, very good movie. And in that one, they got some craziness at the end of his life, but I mean, that doesn't go past the early 50s because you just can't explain it. Eva wanted to go see that movie, so I took it to her and I said, "Okay, Eva, what do you think?" And she said he had it down. Leonardo DiCaprio had Howard down. It was
Awesome.
it was perfect. He did a great job of that. It just doesn't ever get into the reality of past the early 50s. It doesn't go there.
Right, right. And you mentioned so you had a website up. What was the reason it was taken down?
I don't even remember. I don't even remember what it was, but we had a website on there, and then Doug Wellman, someone came to Doug, and Doug said, "I think we better take this down,"
Oh,
and
wow.
so we took it down. And I
Okay.
don't remember the details of it. So all we've got right now is just go on Amazon, and it's got the paperback for about $20, and there's a Kindle on there, and then there's also an audio on there.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing that you were able to uncover a lot more of the history, a lot of the details of such an enigmatic figure, and you're able to tell a story that I'm guessing nobody else really has, since you had firsthand access to Eva.
Well, if
So,
Eva would have died, not told the story would have died with her,
Yeah.
just disappeared with her. Yeah.
yeah, that's a great service that you're doing, presenting us this information. Before we get out of here, did you want to leave our audience with any closing thoughts? Or?
Say that again now.
I said before we get out of here, did you want to leave our audience with any closing thoughts?
Oh boy, read the book.
Yeah.
Read the book. That's
Yeah.
important because the book is written around you decide. Here's what we put in the facts, everything that we know about it, but it's still a theory. It's still until we have DNA, because nobody believes pictures at all. Nobody believes
Right.
pictures.
Right.
So until we have DNA, and I'm not sure where we're going to have DNA. So that is the only real proof of it. We have done picture comparisons, and we got some of those in the book, and the picture comparisons do look alike, but they don't prove anything. They just don't prove anything. So grab the book, read it. And actually, I'd love to hear from you. I think it's real, or it's a bunch of baloney.
Yeah.
And we'd like to thank everybody for tuning in. We'll catch y'all next time.